Welcome back to Israel Undiplomatic. I'm Ruthie Blum.
And I'm Mark Regev.
Please remember to like and subscribe to this podcast and to JNS TV in general and to jns.org for all our content. So, Mark, how are you doing today? It's Jerusalem Day.
It is. It's the day Israelis celebrate the reunification of the city, of the capital in 1967. It's an interesting day. Obviously, it's marked in all sorts of ceremonies, and there's the flag-waving celebrations here in Jerusalem. But I think it's true also to say, Ruthie, that the celebrations, I think, are limited geographically, primarily here in Jerusalem. They're not across the country. Like, I think you can live in Tel Aviv and not notice that it's Jerusalem Day at all. And secondly, I think you can also say they're limited maybe by sector. Like for obviously for the Haredim, it's not a special day, predominantly. I don't know, I can't speak for all of them, but for secular Israelis, it's okay. It's primarily a day, I think, where the national religious, the Bnei Akiva types, they get out there and they celebrate and they wave their flags. Do you agree with that?
I do, but it's nothing new. I raised all four of my children in Jerusalem. And I remember noticing this decades ago. Partly it was because the left was already very focused on talking about peace with the Palestinians, a two-state solution, and the occupation. And I'm going to say that in air quotes, which I hate, because the idea was if there's any strife here, it's because of the occupation, and that the Six-Day War was responsible for that. And therefore, it's not really a happy day. And I have to say, during those years, I remember two of my children in kindergarten were taught to paint Palestinian flags. And,
next to Israeli flags, I presume.
I don't remember that part because I remember being very upset that, how about let's wait for a minute before you're already painting Palestinian flags. Believe me, Palestinian children were not painting Israeli flags in their nursery schools. But also, I asked my children, school-age children, grade school, elementary school, on Jerusalem Day, if they knew what it was about, okay? And they didn't know. They weren't taught. That yes, they were singing songs and maybe waving flags, but they didn't. And my children were in a secular school in a neighborhood in Jerusalem that was very kind of enlightened, So this isn't new. And I also just want to add that this year we really can't judge because we're all we're in a national trauma because we're still at war. Our sons and daughters are fighting. We have sons and daughters held captive in Gaza, some dead, unfortunately. And we have a whole section of northern Israel burning, literally and figuratively. We have evacuees all over the place. It's not really an atmosphere for celebration.
So I'd like to address some common misconceptions about the unification of Jerusalem. And I think they need to be addressed, especially to an international audience that we have. Misconception number one, that people just don't know or have forgotten or have conveniently forgotten, is that it's only since the unification of the city in 1967 are the holy sites of all faiths, protected. They're administered autonomously by their own religious community. People forget that before 1967, and in contrast to the agreements that were reached in the armistice of 1949, Jews could not pray at the Western Wall. It was forbidden. And the fact that all groups have religious freedom in Jerusalem, that all religious sites are protected, and that each religious site for the different faiths, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, are administered by their local communities. That's only happened under Israeli control. But a more important point, and I think it's a widespread misconception, especially in international media, the idea that the Palestinians in East Jerusalem are just waiting for the Israelis to leave, that they want to see their communities and their neighborhoods be part of a future Palestinian state. Yes, that they're all waving Palestinian flags and just waiting for the terrible Israelis to end their, what did you say before, to end their occupation. It's a myth. in poll after poll, and I'm not talking about polls done by the JNS or other Zionist organizations, I'm talking about polls done by the Palestinians themselves. When you ask East Jerusalem Palestinians in a final status agreement, do you want to be part of Palestine or do you want to be part of Israel? What do they say? Either a plurality or a majority say they want to be part of Israel.
Well, they're not stupid, you know. As many of them would like to see us dead, they're not stupid about what they gain from being part of Israel. And in fact, you know, after the 6-Day War, when the gates, literally and figuratively, of the old city were open, Israelis were so thrilled. I mean, Israelis love peace, okay? Israelis just want peace. When we had a peace deal with Egypt, Israelis flooded Egypt to see belly dancers and to taste the food. Israelis, after the Abraham Accords, went to Dubai and everywhere. That's what we want to do. And what we did was end up flooding the old city, the markets, and shopping there and eating delicious Arab food there. And I'll tell you, during the Second Intifada, the suicide bombing war, when Israelis were just, you know, their buses were blowing up and there were stabbings everywhere, the old city, the market in the old city emptied out because Israelis were afraid to go there and they might get killed. And I remember one day I had to go through there I had to go somewhere, and I walked through there at my own peril, of course. And store owners were sitting there. Their stores were empty, and they were trying to persuade me to come in and shop. And I remember saying to one of them, you know what? Stop blowing yourselves up, and maybe you'll have some more customers coming. And this is their tragedy. Not that I feel sorry for them. Excuse me. I'm too busy feeling sorry for my own people. But this is their tragedy. They are suicidal in every...
Look, when East Jerusalem Palestinians in these polls, and as I said, poll after poll, say that they want to be part of Israel, I'm under no illusions. It's not that they're Zionists and they're singing a tikva. It's just they prefer to be in a first world country with
medical services,
and social services and economic opportunities, and they don't want to live in... you're not supposed to say it anymore, but a third world country, a dictatorship where corruption rules and so forth and so on. But I think people should understand, when you see those stories in the press about, you know, they're all just waiting for Israel to leave, it's a myth. It's just a myth. It's even a lie. I think we should also remember that Jerusalem Day, and it's the 5th of June. We're broadcasting, we're taping this program on the 5th of June. It's the anniversary of the 6-Day War. And that is also important. Why is it important? Because people say, if only Israel gave back the territories we conquered in 1967, we'd have peace. But then you have to ask the following question. What was the Arab-Israel conflict about before 1967? In other words, if it's all about the territories that we took after 1967, if only we gave back all those territories, we'd have peace. It's like, so why didn't we have peace before 1967? Yeah. What was that all about?
And the PLO was formed 3 years before then. And there have been Arab attacks on Israel all the time. And by the way, we have made deals, peace deals that involve, of course, always involve Israeli concessions, painful concessions. So, you know, to act as though we're the ones not trying to have peace is ridiculous. But right now, I think this really brings us to the question of our sovereignty, because when Jerusalem conquered, I hate that word, but okay, we conquered Jerusalem. Why do I hate that word? Because Jerusalem is the Jewish capital throughout the millennia. But we said, okay, we announced the Temple Mount is in our hands. And then we promptly gave the keys to the Waqf to guard over the religious sites on the Temple Mount, which is the holiest site in Judaism and only the third holiest in Islam.
Okay, so can I interrupt you because that was a decision taken by Moshe Dayan, who was the defense minister at the time, immediately following the 6-Day War. There was actually a group of soldiers raised an Israeli flag on the Temple Mount, and he asked them to take it down. I think there was a concern.
Some things never change.
No, there was a concern in Israel at the time that Israel's control of Jerusalem would be augmented by the fact that we wouldn't antagonize the international community, that we'd be very respectful of each community's and each faith's religious sites. And maybe, I mean, you can, what did you just sigh and like you disagree with everything I was saying?
Exactly.
But maybe the fact that we've been in Jerusalem and we've built this city, and it's now, if it was a small country town, so to speak, back in 1967, and today it's a major metropolis, is it because of, by respecting the holy sites of the different faiths very strongly, that we have allowed this city to grow and prosper as Israel's capital?
But we would have respected those religions anyway, okay? But our tendency, and it's not all of our tendency, it's a certain sector of Israeli society, and it's always been like that, including before the establishment of the state. There was this division, all right? And it was a division between Israelis who said you need an iron fist and an iron wall, and then you can be magnanimous. And the others who said, no, you appease and you appease.
Let's stop it. Even Begin and Shamir,
yes,
who were not known necessarily for being,
liberal.
They accepted this policy about the Temple Mount and not to raise an Israeli flag there. And I would add also that within Orthodox Judaism, the majority opinion still is
the Jews should not be
not go
pray
up there.
on the Temple
Correct.
Mount. But my point isn't whether they should or they shouldn't from Judaism's perspective. My point is that I don't know if people realize that Jews are not allowed, if Jews are even caught on the Temple Mount mouthing a slight prayer, not even saying it out loud, they can be arrested and taken down off of it. This is insane, okay? Every religion, people are allowed to practice their religion freely in Israel, except Jews. That's the travesty. And I disagree with you that I think in the Middle East, the language of the Middle East is this: we won, we're strong, and we are also magnanimous. Our victory makes us magnanimous. And we have Judeo-Christian values. You don't have to worry. We will protect your right to pray and worship wherever you want. There are mosques all over this country. We would not have gone back on that principle, but we would have told the world and our enemies, yes, this is ours. It has been ours historically, and it is again ours. And that is a big mistake.
I agree and disagree. I agree that I believe on a philosophical level, the idea that Jews are barred from praying on the Temple Mount, and that you can raise legitimate concerns that that's affecting their freedom of religion. I think, though, however, all Israeli governments, both of the Labour Party and of the right, all Israeli governments have enforced what is called the status quo, which means Jews can visit there and not pray. And I think the feeling is realpolitik, that we've been very careful as we pursue peace with the Arab and the Muslim world, and who knows, maybe Saudi Arabia is just around the corner for a normalization agreement, that we want to be very sensitive of Muslim sensitivities. And the decision was taken that the prayers are in the kotel at the bottom, and up on the mosque, that's where the Muslims pray and Jews can visit.
Okay, it's helped us, okay? So doing that, being sympathetic, understanding, pragmatic, whatever language you want to use, what has it gotten us? It has gotten us a propaganda campaign that Jews any minute or all the time are about to storm the Temple Mount and take it over and destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It is a lie. It's a lie that's perpetuated. It's a lie that's spread by the Palestinian Authority and by Hamas and by Iran. And it's a lie. But as I said, it would be one thing if all our attempts at getting friends, gaining friendships in the region had to do with our liberal policies, then I would also agree. But evidence shows that it's just the opposite. And today, our pragmatism about the north, our northern border, with Lebanon shows that it's like, okay, you know what? Israel was attacked on October 7th, and it's in a war now. Now, Hezbollah in Lebanon, it can just reassert its borders. It can just go into Israel and decide that Israel has no sovereignty over the north. And by the way, it's already creeping down southward. We've had rockets go into Akko and, Naharia. It's not so far from Haifa, and that's not so far from Tel Aviv. And we saw in 2006 what happens when Hezbollah bombs the center of Israel. And we're sitting there letting this happen, letting the entire north burn. And it's all because of the Biden administration tying our hands, not letting us win the war in Gaza, warning us constantly that all we need is a ceasefire, because the Biden administration, all it wants to do is appease Iran, and Iran is behind all of this.
So I think it's a touch more complicated. I think also, in my understanding of government policy, look, we've said after October 7th, we've said, and this has been repeated by the Israeli government and members of the war cabinet again and again. They've said our goal is to destroy Hamas's military machine, to get the hostages home, and to have a new reality in Gaza when this is over. Right. About the north, when you talk about Hezbollah in Lebanon, we have not articulated a goal to destroy Hezbollah. The goal that has been articulated is much more minimalistic. It is to push Hezbollah back from the border, so that our people who used to live in the north, who've been, internal refugees now, they've been relocated to safer places, that they can return to their homes, and as you say correctly, many of the homes have been destroyed, and rebuild their homes. That's the goal, to push Hezbollah back. Now, that'll be achieved, pushing Hezbollah back either through conflict or through diplomacy, or quite likely
diplomacy.
You don't know, but it can be done either way, or it will be done in the real world. It is often done by a combination of the two, that a military operation facilitates afterwards some sort of new understanding, a new reality.
Like Resolution 1701 that ended the Second Lebanon War. Really, we saw how well that worked. UNIFIL troops being supposed to be keeping Hezbollah from rearming and all that. And then as soon as they saw one Hezbollah fighter, they all ran like hell. And by the way, Hezbollah now has, 150,000 rockets and tunnels, by the way. So, the fact is that it's not just a combination. Yes, we end up signing deals. We also had a ceasefire deal in place on October 6th in the South. It's about time we stop imagining that our enemies are deterred, especially when they keep firing missiles and drones at us. I think we've got to do something. And you say push them back. Okay, but we're not pushing them back.
So I think one has to be patient. I think the minute the situation in Gaza stabilizes a bit, I didn't say we have to finish the job, but when it stabilizes a bit, we'll be able to deploy more resources to the north. I think it's only a matter of time. It's clear Israel refuses to return to October 6th in the north, when Hezbollah is right on the border, right? That's not going to happen again. I think also it's very interesting. Hezbollah, as you said correctly, has somewhere around 150,000 rockets, which they haven't used. They can hit Tel Aviv, they can hit Jerusalem, they can hit Haifa. So far, they've been quite restrained, and you have to ask why. And I think the major reason is they look at what's going on in Gaza, and they say, if we start a war with Israel, Beirut will look like this. And the truth is, Hezbollah, Lebanon is a country of different communities. There are Christians, and there are Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims, and there are Druze. And I think even in the Shia community, which Hezbollah claims to represent, there are people who look at Hezbollah and they say, you drag this country into war. You provoke the Israelis to an overwhelming response. We might not like the Israelis, but don't you dare start a war that will bring death and destruction upon Lebanon. And I think that has been a factor that has led Hezbollah so far not to use its entire capabilities, because they understand full well, and the Lebanese people understand full well, what are the consequences of a full-scale Israel-Lebanon war. And I hope it'll be possible to push them back either militarily or diplomatically without a full-scale war, though. If they want a full-scale war, they'll get a full-scale war.
But Mark, they're also watching Gaza, and they're listening to President Biden. And now, the CIA director, Bill Burns, whose lack of knowledge about the Middle East could fill a football stadium. And he
wasn't the ambassador in Jordan? I thought he had some Middle East.
He doesn't know anything about the Middle East. Doesn't matter where he was ambassador. He has willful blindness, or maybe he's just an idiot. I don't know. But he's. I shouldn't say idiot. I will say it. My country is in an existential crisis, and its chief ally is tying its hands. So I'm sorry. I will say that, and I'll say that he is even saying, we're going to pressure Hamas into accepting a ceasefire deal because, maybe Sinwar is in his tunnels, but he'll see that the Palestinian people are suffering. Really? He is using the Palestinian people. He does not care if they all drop dead. He doesn't care. And these are the people negotiating some kind of ceasefire deal. Listen, Hezbollah is watching. And it is not just that, okay, they don't really want a full-scale war. They may not need it. They say, look, we sit tight. Biden will do the work for us, and the Israeli public will get impatient, and they'll have demonstrations, and let's just sit back. We'll just set them on fire and everything. But if they don't respond properly, we know we can keep doing it. They're watching, and Iran is watching. And let me just make one point. You know that the Ayatollah Khamenei, he gave a speech recently, and he praised the students on American campuses as part of the resistance. He praised them for their protests. And at the end of his speech, he said, and you guys all better brush up on your Quran.
So I'll say the following. We can have policy agreements with the Americans, but I don't think you can call them idiots. I think we can disagree between friends and allies. I think it's perfectly normal. Anyone would say, if you read the history of the Second World War, everyone talks about the great partnership between Roosevelt and Churchill to defeat Hitler, yes? And it was a great partnership. But actually, if you go into the details, they were arguing about everything, from where the Second Front should be, where it should be, and when it should be. And they had huge arguments on all sorts of issues. And so the idea that allies and partners don't disagree and sometimes argue, that it's just an illusion. Of course, independent countries, sovereign countries have different priorities. But to say that America in the world today, as we fight this war, is our best friend. Now, you could say they're not being as good as friend as they could be, but can you name another country that's a better friend than the United States of America?
I'll tell you. That's sort of not the point at the moment, okay? It is. The United States of America is Israel's best friends, and all polls in America show that. I'm talking about the administration in Washington. And by the way, if you want to
let me rephrase the question. Is there another government on the world that is as good a friend to Israel as is the United States?
One doesn't come to mind at this moment. And by the way, if there were one, it would be a small, insignificant one, okay? But no, I would say, yes, in Eastern Europe, I might say, Hungary maybe. There are countries or the Czech Republic. There are countries in Eastern Europe. Western Europe is finished as far as I'm concerned. But Eastern Europe, there's still...
The German has been pretty good this time.
Germany, said it would have to arrest. It would have to arrest...
But Olaf Scholz has been pretty good.
Well...
Rishi Sunak has been pretty good.
Except...
In London?
Again, except yes and no. Talking out of two sides of their mouths. But my point is, but the Biden administration, you say there are best friends and there are arguments. Really? Did Churchill try to actively oust Roosevelt from the presidency or vice versa? No, we have a president in Washington who is openly trying to cause Netanyahu's government to collapse. He's said it. They're acting towards it. He has Democratic backers who are funding it. And, so I'm sorry. I do not consider them friends.
Look, I think there's a difference. If you ask me, From the point of view of the Democratic administration, is Netanyahu their flavor of the month? And the answer is obviously not. They would have preferred that he wouldn't have won the last election and that to be another coalition. Yes, they were much more comfortable with someone like Lapid for their own reasons. Yes, but between that and actively trying to bring him down, and I'll ask you the following question: came out this last week since we met last on our last podcast. We saw the invitation letter to Netanyahu to speak before the Congress, and it was signed by both the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership. And I presume that without getting a green light from the White House, not the majority leader in the House and not the Senate majority leader, neither of those leading congressional Democrats would have signed that letter without the green light from the White House.
It's possible. And it's possible, although from what I understand, Biden is not going to attend the speech, just like Obama
He doesn't have to attend the speech. Protocol doesn't say the vice president. It'll be interesting to see what Kamala Harris does, because she should
told her not to attend the speech as well. This is what I heard. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
Look, the point isn't whether, I see what you're saying. What you're trying to say is, look, even Chuck Schumer signed that letter. You know what? I don't care. This is an administration that is pressing us to lose the war. Said that they will withhold weapons if they fear we're going to use them offensively rather than defensively. Has actively, President Biden in his recent speech, he actively called on Israelis to take to the streets to keep up their protests. I'm sorry, no. It is unacceptable. And the only question then is, can we? I understand that we need America, although America needs us too. We're on the front line of global jihad, okay? And the fact that the Democrats don't get it or they think it's something they can live with, that's why they're in such distress, and that's why America is in such deep distress. That's a different issue. But the fact is that they're not helping us. They're not behaving like allies.
So I think it's all a matter of when you look at the half glass, is it full or empty, right? So they've done things that we don't like. And it's not. I think it's not a partisan issue. They've done things that people in the opposition also don't like, and the opposition in Israel. But have they so far given us diplomatic support, their veto at the UN Security Council when it was required? Yes, they have. Have they given us munitions that we need? Did they move the aircraft carriers at the beginning? Did they help us shoot down those Iranian missiles? And the answer on all those things is positive. And I don't think you should, you shouldn't say, oh, that's just all not important. And so, like in a lot of matters of international relations, the ultimate truth is this, that with all your complaints, we have no better friend around the world of any significance than the United States of America. It's a relationship like any relationship, like the relationship between two partners who live in a marriage, yes? You have ups and downs. You've got to work at it. But the truth is, you said before, you said that, we bring America a lot and they bring us a lot. We've got to make this relationship work. And I think that's our obligation. And everyone in top government in Israel, I think, understands that. We've got to stand up for our own issues. Just as Begin negotiated hard at Camp David, and over the years, we've got to stand up for our issues. Just as Churchill stood up for Britain when he was dealing with Roosevelt. But to forget that we are ultimately on the same side, that we are allies in a struggle against some very difficult customers, I think these are important things to remember.
I don't think we're on the same side of the issue of Iran, of the Islamic Republic. No, I don't think we're on the same side. In fact, the Biden administration did everything to undermine the ripping up of the Iran deal, and it's also doing everything to undermine the Abraham Accords. So no, we're not on the same side globally. At the moment, when a lot of Israelis were slaughtered, America said, "Oh, that wasn't nice," and now we're losing Biden. And so really, I have no patience for that whatsoever. And I think we need to establish our sovereignty.
So I think we are two sovereign countries, the United States and Israel, and we are partners and we're allies and we're even friends. And we could even say we're family. And inside some families, you can have some difficult arguments sometimes, but never forget that we are family. Can I finish our weekly podcast by remembering an important Israeli who passed away a few days ago? And that is former Foreign Minister David Levy. Now, many of our viewers, listeners around the world might not remember the name, but David Levy is a historical figure in Israeli politics because he broke glass ceilings for Mizrahi Jews, for Jews from the Arab countries. He was the first non-Ashkenazi Israeli to get a really senior post in government. He was both deputy prime minister and foreign minister. I think he opened the door for many other Mizrahim, Sephardi Jews, to reach high positions in the Israeli government. Really a historic figure. I remember him because of my professional biases. Yes, I remember him when Begin came back from Camp David with the agreement with Egypt, and many people inside Herut, at the time, the major group within the Likud, couldn't support Begin. Shamir didn't support Begin on Camp David. Ahrens didn't support, even Olmert didn't support Begin on Camp David. David Levy put all his weight behind Begin and helped get it through the party and political forums. I also remember in the 1980s in the National Unity Government, he was instrumental working with Rabin to get the a pullout from northern Lebanon, central Lebanon, and having the redeployment to the south. I think he should be remembered for being a wise statesman and for being this pioneer in breaking the glass ceiling for so many Israelis who came from the Arab and Muslim countries.
Yes, may he rest in peace. So that concludes this week's episode. As always, it was great talking to you, Mark.
Always a pleasure, though I think most of the time I'm right and you're wrong.
We'll see about that. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and to JNS TV and jns.org. See you next week.